Welcome to the Mayor Show. As always, we have a very important show today with absolutely the best guest we could get here today. We're going to have two great topics to talk about. It's very, very important, and certainly doesn't need an introduction. Congressman Mike Fitzpatrick. Mike, welcome aboard here today, and I know we have a lot to talk about.
Great to be in Bensalem, Mayor. Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you here. The best town in all Bucks County.
Love it.
Okay. Well, you haven't verified that yet, but we'll come back to that. And over here to my left, as everybody knows, is our Director of Public Safety, Fred Harran. And the topics today are going to be very, very important. I hope you pay attention to it. There is a lot going on in our community, not just here, all over our country, and some of the things that you're going to be talking about with Fred, with DNA, we'll get into. But I want to start with a very important thing to you and to us here in Bensalem, and it's veterans housing, something that's been very important to us. And I know Mike, going back, and excuse me, I call the Congressman Mike, but I've known him so long. So, Congressman, let's go back many, many years ago. I think it's at least 8 when we first got approval to build this veterans housing. It's on Mechanicsville Road. And a lot of things fell through the cracks, certainly in the country at the time for the last, since 2008, and I don't have to tell you, was our 2007, what's been going on with the economy. But it looks like we're back on track with a lot of help from you, Mike. So why don't you talk about that that project?
Yeah, it's gonna be a great project, and you know, on behalf of the veterans community and the constituents of the 8th District, I want to thank Bensalem, you, the mayor, and the people for being so supportive of this housing project for veterans who've fallen on some hard times, who've served the country, and who want to the opportunity to sort of live out their years in dignity and respect and stay in the community where many of them were raised. You know, they're from Bensalem. Housing is very expensive in Bucks County and in this region, and the federal government has, over the history, been supportive of housing projects and programs, especially those for veterans, through the VA mortgage program. Many returning veterans, including my father, came back, you know, to Bucks County and were able to purchase a home because a lot of people helped. So you have proposed a project on Mechanicsville Road, which I find very interesting and very important. And it comes on the heels, you know, the federal government and the state and the county love working with Bensalem because you make the projects so attractive and so easy to work with the township. Comes on the heels of two projects that you and I had worked together on. The Andalusia Senior Housing, Ashland Manor, on Route, is that Route 13?
Yep.
Route 13. That was with the Bucks County Housing Development Corporation. It's a great project. And then the second was it
Presby Homes.
Presby Homes, yeah, right across sort of.
Senior Citizens are there. The Senior Citizens building is right next door to that.
So those are two projects that the township kind of took a lead on, actually brought to the county and said, we have a need here. We have the resources to get the project moving. And it's one of those situations where many hands make light work. So if the township comes in and you have perhaps in some cases a private developer that's willing to support, as many will, a veterans project in this case, and then the county puts in a little bit and the state puts, if everybody puts in a little bit, all of a sudden you have a very nice project. And that's, I think, what we have the opportunity to have on Mechanicsville Road. So in this particular case, the township's going to provide the land. The development approvals, once we get this thing moving, will pass through before your council. And the county.
By the way, council's very in favor of it, so that's another piece of the.
And that's really important. You know, if everybody is in favor, and everybody would be in favor of providing 40 units of affordable housing for veterans, because you know these are individuals we want to keep them in our community, hold them close, have them continue to tell their stories of service to community. There's a great quote from General Washington, who once said that his comment was the ability to attract young individuals in the future to serve their country will be in direct proportion to how they believe veterans of previous wars have been treated by their nation. So if we treat our veterans well, we'll continue to have an inflow of young men and women who want to serve the country. And so you're providing housing, which is important. You're providing the resources to get the project moving. And you're basically saying to veterans, as you do all the time, we were at Parks Casino last week, thanking veterans once again, getting ready for the honor flight trip to Washington.
One of the most important things. Come on, I say it all the time. You and I wouldn't even be sitting here if it wasn't for our veterans. And you know, another piece of that puzzle, Congressman, is that it's so close to shopping that God forbid if a veteran's in a wheelchair even or whatever, a disability they might have, they can go shopping right on the corner there, where the giant supermarket shopping center is.
Yeah, and that's really important.
Oh,
it's
it is, so they can
close,
get around.
Close to
Yep.
transit, so there's some
Transit,
stops
yep.
coming right down Street Road, walking distance. If either you don't have a car, or if you have one, you don't need to use it. Which keeps people active and working. Which is great.
And I think we're talking about the team that comes together. I think you were talking to down in Washington, and we have support from the Veterans Bureau, right, Mr. Castro? Am I right about that?
Yeah, I should have talked to you beforehand because I dropped your name in a very positive way in a congressional hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the time spent with the committee here today. I just want to stay on this issue of veteran housing and veteran homelessness among veterans for a moment. You said in your opening statement that you've reduced homelessness among veterans by 33%, and that is not an insignificant number. And I think together we should celebrate that a little bit, recognizing as well that there's still a lot of work to be done, because that means of that subset population of veterans in this country, people who serve this country, 67% of them are still without homes. And you mentioned, about President Obama has made this commitment to end veterans' homelessness. And one veteran who's homeless is one too many. Yeah. I remember in November of 2009, I was a private citizen back in my home in Levittown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, watching the news, and it was being reported that General Shinseki, who was then the Secretary of VA, had articulated this commitment, and he actually put a time frame on it. He said 5 years. This was November 2009, that he would end that the goal was to end veteran homelessness in the United States. And my thought at that point in time is that's a pretty aggressive goal, and I love aggressive goals, but I had some concerns about how we were going to get there as a nation. And in my community, Levittown is a town that was built for veterans returning from World War II and the Korea-era veterans, one of which is my father, many who never would have had that opportunity to own a home had it not been for the VA and for that commitment. But tucked between the city of Philadelphia and the city of Trenton, New Jersey, as it is, housing prices skyrocketed. It was built in the shadow of a steel mill, and so many of that population found themselves over time to be sort of what's described as house rich and cash poor. And so housing prices have gone through the roof. So in addressing this issue in my community, housing costs are very expensive. And then my second concern is that homelessness is but a symptom, I believe, of other problems like substance abuse, problems like behavioral health issues, of which PTSD and TBI, so these veterans are coming back. There is a community right next to my hometown called Bensalem, and this gets to the issue of bringing in private sector solutions. They've proposed a 60-unit or so veteran housing project. The mayor of Bensalem, Joe DiGirolamo, has committed to donate the land. There are private developers involved, and there's an opportunity for us in our community to work with HUD so that you could be the last dollar into the project rather than the first dollar, and let the private sector lead. So I just would like the opportunity to work with you and your undersecretaries on that. But I want to get to another Bucks County issue, because I think this is an issue in housing authorities that other congressional districts and members of Congress are dealing with. And this had to do with a recapture of sweeping of accounts that occurred a couple of years ago, probably before you were appointed secretary. Housing authorities across the country received a letter where Washington wanted to recapture or reclaim reserves in their accounts back to Washington to redistribute for other programs. And the Bucks County Housing Authority, which I'm very proud of, which does a good job, which manages well its housing, which had built up significant reserves and uses those reserves to build new projects, to get individuals in the projects on the road to self-sufficiency. They received this letter, and they were going to lose millions of dollars that they were prepared to reinvest in the community. The housing authority just to the south of us, the city of Philadelphia, it's well known for the problems that they had. They really had no reserves. They had mismanaged their authority. They settled lawsuits unrelated to housing, paid millions and millions in legal fees. And so the message that was sent by HUD is that if you're a well-run housing authority and you've built up cash reserves getting prepared to reinvest in your community, you will be penalized, and the mismanaged housing authorities in this country were really not penalized in that case because they were going to get the dollars redistributed. I was just wondering if you could comment on what message you think that sends to the housing authorities in many of our congressional districts that are working hard, trying to do a good job in managing and reinvest in the community so we can get to ending things like veterans' homelessness in this country. What message does that send?
Yeah. On the first issue, I look forward to working with you on the issue of veteran homelessness. On the second issue, we want our public housing authorities to succeed. And so you're right that this predate me a little bit. However, it was a subject, I believe, an IG audit, and that money is being held by HUD, but does belong to the PHAs. We want them to have the resources they need to be successful, and we'll look forward to working with you and others.
I appreciate that, but the PHAs could have reinvested in the communities which were well-managed housing authorities. So I would just ask you to consider that.
On the Financial Services Committee, the Housing and Urban Development, the federal agency, we have oversight jurisdiction. And Julian Castro, who's the Secretary of HUD, came before the committee in an oversight hearing. And I was bragging about Bensalem and specifically about you, Mayor, and about this particular project and how we have a lot of local support and it would be great to have federal support. And the reason I said that is that 5 years ago, then Secretary of the Veterans Administration, General Eric Shinseki, made a pretty audacious commitment or promise. He said that and this was 2009, 2010, he said, we will end veteran homelessness in the United States in 5 years. It's a big goal, and I like big goals, but we have many veterans who need help. And so I reminded Secretary Castro that General Shinseki had made that promise, and I said, here's a project. If you have a local government with a local mayor and council supportive that wants to help you on this project, and if we could get some federal help, this project will happen. And so he agreed in the hearing, after I talked to him about it, to do what he could. We followed up with a letter. We sent you a copy. Actually, we've got a response, which we just received this month, which I'll give you a copy of the response from United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, suggesting some ways that we can work together. And so, as I said in the beginning, many hands will make light work on this project.
Well, that's really good news today.
Government, so it's great news.
You just gave us this today, so that's great news. We're looking forward to it. I think it's going to happen this time. I talked to the commissioners. They're on board. So fingers crossed, with your help and down in Washington, it looks like this thing's going to click. And to the veterans out there, hopefully we'll soon have a place here in Bensalem to do our part for them and have some housing.
Yeah, we'll keep swinging away on this one. It's a great project.
Yeah, and the guy on my left has never been this quiet this long. So we had to get over here and talk. Fred, how are you? Good to have Fred Howard, Director of Public Safety. And something that we've been on the cutting edge here in Bensalem certainly is DNA. And through Fred's leadership in the police department have worked in many ways, and now working hopefully with you, Congressman, and getting things done with DNA that Bensalem's been very fortunate to achieve. And one of our big things was Corporal Higgins, that we all met down there and finally gave him his resting place. But I'm going to let you two talk about the DNA now, and you can start out, I guess, Fred, telling them certainly what we do here in Bensalem and how the future can help out with our veterans.
Well, as you know, since 2010, we've had a very unique program here in Bensalem, and that is we have our own local DNA database that we collect DNA from crime scenes, and then we get DNA samples from suspects, and we match them together. And we've closed probably about 300 cases just on that alone. The federal database, we figured out it would only been about 6% of those cases would have actually hit a federal database. So this has been pretty unique, and we've been doing it since 2010. We're one of probably right now less than 50 departments in the United States that are doing it.
Fred, I don't want to interrupt you, but didn't we cut that time period very significantly from when it was done before?
The way it had worked using the state system is it took anywhere from 12 to 18 months to get DNA results back. We get it done now in less than 30 days. We actually piloted a program which we were able to get it done in less than 90 minutes. But we're staying with the 30-day program. We can rush samples and get them back within 24 hours, which is just a huge turnaround time. And the purpose of it is making less victims out there. We want to stop the criminal today that is not going to commit a crime tomorrow. And we've talked about this, before this whole project, and it's pretty unique in law enforcement to utilize services of this nature, hiring and working with a private lab that could do it a lot quicker than a state lab. But what we're looking at now is the next phase of this. We were having some brief, just some conversation after this Corporal Higgins incident where his bones were discovered through DNA, and it was actually, came up with the idea of, I wonder if we can do something with our local database. And we started looking at other possibilities, and we went down to Washington, and we met with, I think, members of the Armed Services Committee, and hopefully we can get some movement in Washington on basically, there's about 60 to 70,000 MIAs still from World War II on. World War II, Korea, Vietnam. I don't think there are any from any of the Gulf Wars or any of the Middle East wars. But the theory was that you get DNA samples, which are less than $100 from living relatives of these missing folks, and then as the bones get discovered in foreign countries, the DNA on the bones are taken, and then the computer just does the same. Right now, the way it works pretty much is they find bones and they try to track down what battle that person could have been in, where that person was in the battle, what happened to that person after the battle, and then they try to find living relatives, and then they send a collection kit out to that house, and then they try to match it together. And that's a lot of ifs, tracking people down in battles.
Well, how's this working with you, Congressman? I know you got very interested in this. So.
Well, this is another area, Mayor, frankly, where Bensalem Township, Bucks County is leading the way for the Commonwealth and the country in the DNA data collection, which is great. And as Fred just indicated, you're using a crime-fighting tool, which is important, for another governmental purpose, which is to bring closure to families of veterans who have been lost in wars and the remains never repatriated or returned. And so, that the situation of Corporal Higgins coming back to Bucks County and being buried at the National Cemetery was so moving and inspiring. What an inspiring story. And his family, they're now in Bensalem. As a matter of fact, some of them I went to Bishop Egan with and was able to reunite with them at the cemetery, and your whole police force was out there because you were able to sort of bring it together in that way. I just want to tell you a quick story. Recently, I was at a memorial service at Arlington National Cemetery for a young fellow from Bucks County, Attilio Lupacini, who was killed in action in North Korea in December of 1950, not within a year of when Corporal Higgins died in combat. And many of these individuals were just buried at the scene of the battle. And likely we will not be able to retrieve Lupacini's remains, but they're using DNA now, and they won't give up hope. So we had the memorial service, and the family was there as well. But so you can see how important this is to the families, and it's just an example where many times, we get frustrated with levels of government not really talking to each other, or sort of missing.
Like with me every day.
Yeah, we love. You talk to everybody, Joe, and that's what makes you a great mayor. It's all about communication, and keeping people on the.
I apologize.
On the right track. So, So when we had this situation with Corporal Higgins and the family, after a couple of weeks, Fred and I were talking. I suggested that the Department of Defense has a whole mission in Hawaii, and their job is to track down, work with the families, and try to repatriate those remains. And so the question is, since DNA it's getting more precise and better each and every year, is there a way for us to work with local police departments like Bensalem that has already collected so much data to be able to get those matches and bring those young men and women home? And so Fred came down to Washington, and we did, we had the meetings. Fred attended a meeting with the Armed Services Committee. You have a DNA organization that you work with. Actually, a member of Congress that I know spent a little bit of time with recently, Barbara Comstock from Northern Virginia. She knows this company well also, and I told her about our meetings, and she's interested in helping. And so maybe there's a way for the federal government, the Department of Defense, and local police departments to partner together in the use of all that data that you've collected for such a noble and patriotic purpose.
Yeah, it's an important one, and Corporal Higgins was an incredible day that everybody was involved with. It certainly, I think it made national news, and those kind of things had to be put to rest. I know members of a family desperately want to have that done. They haven't seen, you know, any remains. They just know that they're not here anymore, and that's a terrible thing. But they continue to work, and again, he knows I talk teamwork all the time, and working together. And you're talking about another congressperson being involved in everything. That's how we're going to get it done. So hopefully, in the future, this is going to come together. I'm not hopeful about it. I know it's going to happen. DNA is happening quickly. I mean, it's really moving along. So now you're bringing Fred down there and making it aware. Hopefully this will continue to go.
Sort of, you know, from my perspective, Mayor, two examples of where, you know, Bensalem is blessed with many resources, and you have, you know, cutting-edge departments and a forward-thinking council and governmental structure where, whether it's veterans housing, a lot of communities would just sort of let the federal government or someone else at their own pace take care of it. The reason I think that you're ahead of the curve is you recognize an issue, an opportunity to solve a problem, and you put the resources behind it and all the brain power and the effort that goes along with that. And you know, I'm just so proud to represent Bensalem in the United States Congress.
Well, we're proud to have you represent us, and I'll talk about that in a second. I know that coming out of business, the frustrations that I have in government sometimes is how tough it is to get everybody working on the same page. So, but I see that it's coming together. We've been very fortunate here. You know, we brag about our police department, and rightfully so. And Fred, I'm going to give you the last word on DNA.
I just think this is it's reachable. It's within
Or
our
anything
reach.
else you want to talk about. How's that?
Nah, you don't want to do that.
Well, it's a short show. I mean, go ahead.
And you can add it.
Go ahead.
I just think this. You know, when we were talking in the office, it's you know, it's not my idea. It was your idea. It's a brilliant idea, and it's attainable. It could be done for a lot cheaper than what they're doing now. And I think last year it was 85 remains that they identified at an incredible cost. And I ran some preliminary numbers, and the cost is not that much to do this program nationwide. That when they find remains, to get the bone samples, taking DNA from bones is a little bit more than just taking it from a buccal swab from the inside of your mouth. But it's cost effective, and you can probably bring back a lot of soldiers that were never identified and get them back with their families for a very good cost.
But, you know, you said something earlier that alarms me a little bit. You said there's only 50 police departments doing this, maybe about 50. I think we need more of those departments involved if you're going to make this thing more successful. You know what I'm saying? I mean, forget cutting edge and all that stuff. It's here. So it should be something that's promoted throughout the country, so where they can be part of that team locally. And I hope that's where it goes. Do you have anything else? Because
no, I mean, it's not just, you know, it's, you know, look, it started in a police department with a crime fighting tool. This would be certainly a Department of Defense project that could be just taken from the police world, as you said earlier, and put into the military world. I mean, the military's been doing DNA for a long time, but just to bring back missing folks in a rapid pace is what they're not doing, and they can do it. It's within our reach, and the technology is there today.
Congressman, you have the last word.
Yeah, just sort of in wrapping up the discussion about Corporal Higgins, Mayor. Earlier this year, I was in South Korea with a delegation of representatives of Congress meeting on certain trade issues, and we happened to be in Seoul, South Korea. It was the day that I received a telephone call from my staff advising me that not only had Corporal Higgins' remains been identified, but they would be returned back to the United States, to Bucks County and the National Cemetery the following week. And I entered a meeting with President Park of South Korea, and I thanked her on behalf of our constituents here in Bucks County for their work together with our Department of Defense and local officials to make that happen. The following week, we were all together at the National Cemetery, full honor guard, including the Bensalem Police Department that was there. And you could see the peace that was with the family of Corporal Higgins. And so I just wanted to say, you know, it was very meaningful for me. I can only imagine what it was to the family, and it's the continuing service that you and your department provides the people of this area. Thank you.
Well, Mike, I thank you, and I said you had the last word, but I'm going to take the last word and opportunity here. We talked a lot of good news today. The bad news is you're not running again, and to us, that's bad news. So I want to thank you for your service
Thanks,
to the
Joe.
country, and I know you're sticking to your word, because I've tried to convince you before, but you're sticking to your word, and hopefully that it'll continue to get the kind of service you gave us back here in Bucks
Thank you.
County. We thank you so much for all of that, and continued success, and keep the ball rolling for us, Mike.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Let's get this Veterans Project done before the...
We will, but
We're good.
thank
We're in good
you.
shape.
Again,
Thanks, Joe.
Congressman, thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
You got it.
Until next time, everybody, God bless.